Y'all in the winning circle, shot some squares though. You in the killing fields, ignoring the scarecrows. Yeah, ho, I'm Benny Blanco in the last scene, making the power play high off for caffeine. This is a tag team, fantasy the bad dream. The male version of Kerry killing the glass queen. Bati bloggers quit dodging my emails. Take that whack shit off, the real prevail.
Welcome to FREELUNCH Podcast, home of the New South Movement and the New South Movement Network. This is your boy Tight, one half of the FREELUNCH Podcast duo, BGs. What's happening?
FREELUNCH Podcast family. Ain't nothing going on. BG the 27 kid. Tight. Man. We back at this again, huh?
We back at it again. Your boy been up for some hours now, but hey, we do it for the people.
You depriving yourself of rest?
Nah, man, just grinding, working.
Just the grind, huh?
It's just the daily grind. We
Sleep is for suckers.
We put in 12 hours a day. Then we come home and we get people to agree to do interviews with us, and we try to continuously provide quality products, quality guests, and use this platform as a platform to educate our end users.
Never not working. It's more than a hashtag for sure.
It is. And I don't think people realize what we do behind the scenes to make this happen, especially on nights like tonight when our guest tonight, is someone that is really volunteering his time and doing this as a friend, considering his own personal responsibilities that he has today. And then just from what he was telling me earlier, how he got his 3 boys tonight, and he's making certain that they're taken care of, and at the same time he's willing to educate our audience. So that within itself just speaks highly of the character for our guest tonight, BG.
At one point or another, they realize that what this FREELUNCH Podcast is really about. So, we do what we do. And if they ain't caught up yet, maybe one day they will.
BG, but you know what's so interesting? I thought about you with today's podcast. And the reason why. Well, you tell the audience why.
No, we ain't gonna get into that, other than, this is, we got a legendary figure. We got a respected, Auburn University faculty member on his hands. He's a great man, but I almost died in his backyard.
And that wasn't even the reason why. But we can share that. We can share that story. Yeah. But what I was referring to was because
we're gonna share it. We're gonna leave it. We're gonna just put it like it involved a rifle, an electric fence, and a lot of blood.
And see, BG, I was referring to the garden in your backyard.
Man, we can talk about that too.
I was talking about because today's guest, and I'm gonna go ahead and let's go ahead and probably bring him on. But today's guest, he knows a lot about probably one of the most lucrative industries in the United States. He's the chair of the Auburn Agriculture Department. And the thing about it, BG, is not only is he a chair, but he's a friend. Yeah. And your story is real. It's not anything that we're making up, but we were in his backyard, and it did involve some rifles, and it did involve turning an electric fence, and the rest is history. But I'm sure with our special guest, the chairman of the Arbor Agriculture, Economic Rules, Sociological Department, was hired at Auburn as an extension economist and assistant professor in 2002, was promoted to associate professor in 2007, and recently attained professor status. A Louisiana native, he earned his bachelor's degree from Southern University in Baton Rouge in 1993 and his master's from the University of Missouri in 95, and then worked for almost 3 years at Florida A&M University as the assistant professor and director of A&M Small Farm Outreach Program. He returned to his home state in 1998 to complete his PhD in Ag Economics at LSU, or the Louisiana State University, without further ado, we'd like to introduce the Free Lunch Podcast family listeners to the Honorable, I'm going to say Deacon Deacue Dr. Fields.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here, guys.
Glad to have you, Doc. How you feeling today? You had a long day at the office.
Long day at the office, and then the second job starts with the kids. So,
and that's what we was talking about earlier, BG, is that he's willing to take time out this day to educate our audience. So, and what our audience don't know is a lot of this conversation and really us wanting to have Dr. Fields on the show kind of started a few weeks ago when we were down in Auburn doing another interview. And then we had the opportunity to go by his office just to catch up and see how things were going with him, his family, but also what was going on in the department. And then that's when we started to have a really interesting round table that kind of has transpired into him, his willingness to be on our show today. So I'm really excited to have him on the show.
Before we get into it, Dr. Fields, Jeremy just gave you just kind of a brief introduction. So can you let the people know what it is that you do on a day-to-day basis?
Right now, my primary responsibilities are for managing the Ag Econ and Rural Sociology department. That department, we have 15 full-time faculty, 4 field economists throughout the state of Alabama, about 200 undergraduate students and 50 graduate students. So my main job is actually providing some direction for that, and kind of my personal thing that I do beyond just managing is actually working in the area of food marketing and kind of local foods. That's kind of what I do on a daily basis. So I deal with producers and a little bit, but primarily working with kind of providing direction for the department.
Let's talk about where you're born and raised and where you come from. You're from the state of Louisiana. Can you kind of just introduce our audience to where you were raised and how you even got into agriculture? And would it be safe to say that you're a black cowboy?
That's very safe to say. Very safe to say. You could almost say I'm the son of a sharecropper, a grandson of a sharecropper. So I grew up in a very small town in Louisiana, a town of about 5,000 people, and agriculture was the backbone of the economy there, and basically known for cotton production. And so I kind of grew up around that. We lived in town, but we had a farm that we went to every day. That was about 7 miles from our house. My grandfathers on both sides were farmers. My mother's father owned a 350-acre farm in Louisiana, which is still in the family. And he was a stickler for education and farming. He had 10 kids, and he sent every one of those 10 kids to Grambling University, and they all majored in education and graduated from the education department at Grambling, all from a 350-acre farm. And so that's kind of where my, love for agriculture came from, was kind of hanging around him as a kid. And my dad actually grew up, he actually met my mom picking cotton for my grandfather. So, that was kind of an interesting deal there. So he was coming to work at their farm because my dad's father owned a smaller farm of about 25 acres, little cattle operation, and he was a school bus driver. But my dad got into it, and he ended up he was an ag teacher first, and then worked for the USDA Farm Service Agency, which is an agency that loans money to producers for crop loans and purchasing land and things like that. So I guess my interest initially, I always grew up around horses, showed horses, still show horses, and y'all crossed the pasture with those horses in it when y'all came to my house even. But my dad, when I was about 12 years old, we had a outbreak in our cattle herd called brucellosis, and we had to sell every cow on the place. And at the time we sold them all, he just kind of backed off, and he said, well, when we start back, I want you to do it. And so with that, it kind of, you think 13 years old, he's telling me that when the herd starts back, it's going to be up to me to start it. And so I went to, he had stopped working for USDA at the time, was working for the state of Louisiana in the Department of Elections. And I went to USDA and took out a $3,000 youth loan. And that's a program that, you know, a lot of kids don't even realize exists, but it's still there. It's basically it's a very low interest, like a 1% loan that you can take out for developing youth, agricultural entrepreneurship type projects. And I got that $3,000 loan and bought 6 bred heifers and, started the herd that we have now, our cattle herd that we have in Louisiana, for raising show steers. Because I was always showing steers, I was buying them from somebody else. So at 14, I had my first steers myself that we raised, and I kind of got my start that way. And my goal, I was in 4-H and FFA, and I had to keep records on everything, and really got to where I was almost anal about keeping up with every penny that we spent on them, and you know how much money we made and all that type stuff. And that kind of grew my interest in just overall agricultural economics field, which is, you know, kind of what I decided to major in. But had to keep those records. And my senior year, you know, after doing this for a few years, my senior year, I actually won a reserve championship at Southern University's livestock show. And not only did I win with the calf that I raised, I also had 3 other calves that I sold competing in that competition. So basically that is what set me up to pay for college. You know, I left that with profit of about $7,000, and I was a kid at 17. And, you know, I don't know about you, but back then that was big money.
A lot of money.
And so that, you know, that just kind of sparked my interest in it. And, you know, my dad kind of laid that foundation, and, you know, I just followed kind of his footsteps, and he was in just vocational ag. And I just went into the overall ag economics area, but, just, you know, kind of hung around it and finished undergraduate, went straight into graduate school at University of Missouri. And just, that was, a good thing going from HBCU to a majority white institution, just really looking at kind of broadening your perspective and seeing, you know, what existed in the other world in a way in terms of agriculture. Growing up in Louisiana, I saw a lot of small farms, and you know, I thought my grandfather's farm of 350 acres was as big as you wanted to ever see. But you go to the Midwest, and you know that's nothing. You see, you know, producers with 2,000 or 3,000 acres of corn and rows of corn as far as you can see, and just imagine the wealth that's created from that type of land ownership. So that kind of broadened my horizons there, and worked for FAM, and another big educational experience actually dealing with primarily black farmers. And I was working there at the time of the black farmer lawsuit that came about, and just going to the listening sessions and hearing the problems that black farmers had over time, and hearing them articulate issues that they had was very enlightening experience for me. So that sparked my interest to continue on my education and go back to LSU for a PhD.
You said a lot just then, and I'm kind of interested in going back to your childhood at that 13 or 14 years of age. Mm-hmm. What's the day in the life of a 14-year-old that's raising his own herd of cattle?
I think back then, and at 14, I had my own checking account, a checkbook. We didn't have debit cards, so had to balance my checkbook, and I had to buy all of the feed for the cattle and things like that. And a day in the life, actually, growing up in a small town. Back then, actually, we could get a driver's license at 15, but I was 14, and everybody in town knew what my responsibility was. And I learned later that my dad had told the police officers in town that I had permission to go directly to the farm every day and nowhere else. And so at 14, I would come home and get in his old truck, and he would get off work at 5. And when it wasn't football season, every day I had to be on the farm. As soon as I got off school, I'd go home and change and head down and start doing the work. By the time he got off work at 5, we'd have about another 30, 45 minutes of things to do and wrap up, from feeding cattle to, you know, checking all the fences. And sometimes I ride a horse every now and then, you know, just to check everything out, and, you know, just handling all the business of a farm. You know, it was, as much as anything, people think of it as hard work and all that, but it was really relaxing to me. And kind of the reason I kept having horses here is that when I moved to Auburn is because it's kind of my outlet to go out and relax and enjoy the land and enjoy agriculture, really. So that developed me a lot in terms of having responsibility. And like I said, I have 3 sons, and they rotate right now, times going out when they have to feed the horses and all that. And my oldest son, he got in trouble, actually. And so one of his punishments was that we were showing horses, and I made him, his punishment was to get up and go out and feed every morning at 6 o'clock before school. Really 5:45, he had to hit the ground and go out and feed and take care of everything before getting dressed for school and all that. And, you know, it got to the point where I would go out there with him, and he ended up just loving it. He ended up, you know, kind of being something that he enjoyed doing, getting up and just relaxing out there and taking care of the animals. And so I'm trying to use this to teach them that same level of responsibility, of, you know, thinking of this as a business, first of all, but then just knowing that you have something, that these animals depend on you, that all these things depend on you, and being able to manage all of it and knowing where your money's going, where it's coming from. So, that taught me a lot about that, for sure.
Was there ever a point where you like hated going out and performing those tasks?
I was a regular kid now. So, you know, if it's, I didn't play basketball, but if it was a basketball tournament going on, and, you knew all the girls were going to be at the tournament, and, you know, everybody else was, you know, all they had to do was go home and get cleaned up and get ready to go. I may have had stalls to pick, you know, and that type stuff, brush horses off and feed cows, and then have to go back and take a shower, and everybody else had been there chilling. So there were some times in high school where it was tough, you know, because, you know what we think about in high school. Yeah. They were kind of tough sometimes. There were times where I wish I could have just, you know, taken the easy route and been a city boy and enjoyed the city life. But, you know, those times were fewer than the times I enjoyed being out there, really.
I got you.
I didn't like washing dishes, and I used to feel that my sister should have taken care of all that stuff if I had to do all the farm work, but I had to share the dishwashing too. So. And
you talked about you went to Southern University. You didn't play in the band at Southern? Or?
No, I didn't play. I actually played 1 year of football, but I realized very quickly that wasn't going to be how I was going to make a living after being out there a year. And I decided that I walked on, just really did it for the exercise, I guess, and realized that wasn't my calling. So I enjoyed the band. Now, Southern does have the best band in the land.
And the Dolls, too. I'm just speaking for myself right now. I'm speaking for myself right now.
I can agree to that. If you're looking across all universities, I'd say that. So, yeah, Southern they're known for all of those things. Enjoyed that experience, though.
Then you had a shell shock kind of going to the University of Missouri. Mm-hmm. And I find that interesting because of the recent allegations and things that took place at the University of Missouri.
Yes.
Not sure if you had any comments on that.
Well, I went there and I really had overall a good experience there. I was there started in 1993, and you know, coming from Southern, it was a totally different thing. I got there and I was honestly riding around in my car, and everywhere I go, every time I stop at a red light, it seemed like everybody was looking in my car at me. So it was kind of making me nervous. So I called my dad and said, "Look, I'm thinking about going in and buying me a pistol up here because it's kind of, you know, it's a little different. These people look kind of threatening." And so he said, "Well, get one, but you know, you don't need to be thinking about using that." I said, "Okay, I'm just telling you for safety. I don't know why people looking at me like that." So I kept going, and I realized that there were only about 400 black students on a campus of almost 30,000. And I was talking to one of my classmates who was a white female. And she said, "Well, they just looking at you because they assume you're an athlete, and all athletes like celebrities. because the only African Americans here with a car are the athletes. And so, that was at Southern, all the athletes were just regular people. I don't care how good you were, you just like hung in the crowd. So that was kind of, they elevated to that status. And I didn't, I was thinking a totally different thing than that. But that was just kind of my first experience up there.
But you did work at the historic FAMU.
Yes.
And because of that experience, I think our audience would be interested in the history at FAMU in regards to agriculture, and just kind of talk about that experience and enlighten our audience, if you don't mind.
FAM was, that was probably one of the best places I could have landed for a first job. It taught me a lot about, what the plight was of farmers in general, but especially minority farmers. And it really taught me that there were a lot of successful minority farmers around you go down around Lake City and Live Oak, Florida. There were a few black farm families down there that, there was one family, the Watsons down there, who owned over 1,200 acres contiguous. Just that one family had over 1,200 acres there. And back then they had tobacco contracts. And if you had a tobacco allotment, you had that was big money. And so this family, had that situation going on, and several others were, extremely progressive and extremely sharp farmers that the oldest Watson, he was about 90 some years old at the time, and his son was in his 60s and farming. He had another generation already started on the farm. So that was a neat experience to see that. And two other brothers involved, and, it just kind of kept everything in the family. But one of the things was, I mentioned that this is when the Secretary of Agriculture started, there was Dan Glickman at the time. He started listening sessions, for, hearing what black farmers had to say about USDA. And we kind of helped to set up those listening sessions and working at FAMU through our small farm outreach program. And, it would blow your mind, some of the allegations, I'll say, that some of the farmers had, which indicated things like they would, they would be prepared to foreclose on their land, and they kind of said how it was systematic. And I kind of share an example. So one farmer, you take a farmer who has to prepare an entire loan package. And, a lot of times we expect the farmer to be the producer, the marketing person, the accountant, and everything. So he's preparing this loan package, and he may have a small mistake on it. USDA's rule says he has 30 days that they have 30 days to respond to the producer. And so 30 days later, they would tell him, okay, you had a small mistake you need to correct. So, this is a story from a farmer. So I'm just kind of recanting what was said in the listening session. And 30 days later, he would correct it and, send it back in. Another 30 days goes by, and they say, well, you had this one other mistake here that we can't complete the loan until you get this corrected. And so this may go on 2 or 3 times. So now it's 90 days, 120 days since he turned his loan package in, and everybody else has already planted the field. Okay. So he is starting off behind, trying to catch up, trying to get his crop in the field. Cause this is a operating loan to get, it may cost you, to get everything planted $150,000, $200,000 to get all your seeds and chemicals and all those things in the ground. So he's trying to get those things done. So he's trying to catch up now. So what happens? His yields are not going to be what everybody else's yields are because he started so late. His crop, by the time it's time to harvest, when the crop matures, his crop is behind, it's smaller, so his revenue is less. Mm-hmm. And so now he's really not having any living money because he has to use every dime he got to try to pay this loan off. And if he falls short, then they're saying, okay, you got to pay this loan in a certain amount of time or else we're going to foreclose on it. And so they had stories like that, from producers that, would just blow your mind. Time after time, they would have similar stories about, how this happened and, and they felt like the system was set up just where it could make that happen if they didn't have all the skills necessary to complete the operating loans and things like that.
asked that question because I was gonna go in a different direction and really talk about some more modern day, kind of agriculture questions that both you and I have. But Dr. Fields, you bring up a very interesting point, and I wanted to ask you this. That was back when you were at FAM. Looks like that was what, 2002?
No, I was at FAM in the mid 90s. So 93, 95.
93,
yeah.
95. Based on those listening sessions that you all had, fast forward to 2016, in regards to the black farmer, have we seen progress in those type of areas?
Yeah, I really think we have. I think that, bringing it to light and really making sure that people knew what happened. I think that they, I applaud the commission, the Secretary of Ag for actually, really trying to address the problem and bringing it to light. Now, there's been improvement, but I wouldn't say that everything is perfect in that light. I think that, producers have learned where to get the assistance they need and for some of those things, but there are tons of government programs out there that I think producers still need to, look at taking advantage of, that they don't always know and understand. And the information is out there, but I don't know if it's hitting the proper channels to get to these producers, and that all of them are understanding the financial resources that the government can provide to assist them with, things like conservation plans and things for like cross fencing and putting in wells and things like that there are cost share dollars for.
When you hear that type of information, because you're privy to that because of the educational route and the career direction that you chose, and you're finding out that there's this disparity in the way that information might be getting to some of these people on the ground. Was that some of the reason why you wanted to get into academia, so that you could better educate people in this area?
Certainly. And, I will say that, our universities are doing a better job. Alabama A&M here in Alabama, they have a following of African American farmers, Tuskegee being pretty much where I say, the whole cooperative extension idea came through Tuskegee. Those universities really try to keep the message out there. There's still, even with all we do, there's still, room to improve in terms of what producers are aware of, though.
You were introduced to agriculture at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
Our audience member is a lot made up of millenniums,
Mm-hmm.
that 25 to 35 or so age range. We really like to also use this platform as a way to educate our listeners. Can you give us some demographics around how many blacks are in this particular field? We can use Auburn as an example, or we can use, if a larger population demographic that you can offer, and then trying to use this platform to educate on why this is a interesting field and can be lucrative.
Well, I'll kind of address it broadly because I can't tell you exact numbers in terms of how many blacks are there, but I can tell you that we are very grossly underrepresented. And I think a lot of it comes from what we think of when we hear the word agriculture. The first thing that most people think of is, most of the time, you think of a tractor or a mule and digging in the dirt and working hard, extremely hard work. When now agriculture is as high tech as any other field in the world, and you think of agriculture being, a $835 billion industry. That's about 5% of the entire U.S. GDP is agriculture related. And when you think of the farming part, you're thinking that's the big part. But really, if you think of $1 spent on food that we all spend, and everybody, that's listening spend between 12 and 15% of their total income on food, out of every dollar, only 15 cents goes to the farm. The rest of it is all these big businesses that we don't think about that's part of agriculture, that it takes to process, manufacture, they get that food from the farm to your table. So you have companies like Archer Daniels Midland and Dow and BASF, and to break it down where you can hit you in the belly a little bit, Kraft and General Mills and Kellogg's and places like Land O'Lakes and Campbell Soup. These are the places that are really agricultural companies. These companies are looking for people with agricultural backgrounds. Last year, 2015, USDA did a study just looking at how many agricultural jobs were coming available each year. Right, they said in 2015 there was 60,000 agricultural jobs coming available annually, and that our universities are only producing 35,000 graduates. So we have a 25,000 employee shortage from agricultural schools, and they're trying to make it up from business schools and retraining people. But they really wish that these people had agricultural jobs, that had agricultural backgrounds, or agricultural degrees. And so there's a growth shortage. And then you take that and look at what's coming out. A very small percentage of who's in the pipeline would be African Americans. And the companies, I had someone, from a major company in my office last week. And one of the things that they keyed on was that they were interested in diversity. And, so they are recruiting and coming to places where they can find diversity. And this was from someone from a Fortune 500 company, an agricultural company that's a Fortune 500. And, you on that Fortune 500 list, you have about 25 or 30 of those who are ag companies, on just overall Fortune 500. So it's big industry. It's a big deal. And the main thing is changing that perception, and changing people's perception to not think of this as farming, but as food and what it takes to get the food to your table. Out of all the jobs in the U.S., there's over 17 million ag-related part-time and full-time ag jobs in the United States. So about 10% of all the jobs in the U.S. are going to be ag-related, dealing with, ag and other industries related to that. So, you got cotton. You even make money out of cotton. So the money, actual money is cotton bond. It's not made of paper. You call it paper money, but that actual $100 bill in your pocket is made out of cotton, really. But these industries, when you think of what everybody has to do, and that's one of the things that my grandfather kind of instilled in me early on. When we were talking about majors. He said, I know folks without a car. I know folks that don't have a phone. He said, but I don't know anybody who doesn't eat. And he said, as long as people keep eating, agriculture will always be a strong industry. And so that's kind of, his philosophy on that. And that kind of always resonated with me because we all eat, we all would do that. And, I did this study that, profiled Alabama's agriculture and found it's almost a $70 billion industry in Alabama. And the thing that was most interesting is that, you have several industries throughout the state, but ag was in every county. You had a major percentage of agriculture there. So that's one of the only industries where every county of a state, you're going to have a portion that's agriculture, that's represented, that where agriculture is represented. And so, I try to, go out and I handpick students and try to recruit students to come in and get an understanding of it. And you would be surprised that when they come in and look at policy and international trade and things like that they, think about it strictly from a business school perspective. These major companies that they're looking at that you would want to work for, these are ag companies. What difference would it be to work at, Archer Daniels Midland or Berkshire Hathaway? These are ag companies that we have to look at, Frito-Lay and places like that. So I think we talk about it in our college that we have to do a better job of actually branding agriculture and it's always going to have that traditional component, but we kind of have to brand really what we're doing. Looking at the technology that's used. Most people don't, when they think of a tractor, most people don't really understand that most of these tractors that operate on larger farms use what's called precision agriculture. So these things are computer guided. So on this, and this is, typical farming in Alabama that's a commercial farm would have a precision ag instrument on that tractor that has done a GPS mapping of the field. And that GPS mapping tells it, they can take a scan and see, exactly where weeds are, what fertility is at certain places. And they can plug this into their computer, and the tractor will go along and spray the exact amount needed in every spot. So you cut down on chemical waste. You made it more efficient. Using your fuel better, just from this computer system. Now the idea that they're working on that, we hear all about drones in the FAA, to make this easier now, they can fly a drone, and that drone can go across that field and collect all the data. They take a USB drive out of that drone, plug it into the tractor, and it tells the tractor how to, address that field. So, you have a whole biosystems engineering department in our college that, develops these systems and, looks at how it makes, technology fit into agriculture. All of our students have to look at, consider technology and look at what's happening on the cutting edge of technology to be able to compete. We are at a point now where by 2050, they're expecting the population to be 9 billion. So almost a doubling in population by 2050. And it's going to be agriculture's job to figure out how to combine the resources, because we're not going to increase in land. Land is going to be the same. How we make the resources we have now produce enough food to feed the world.
You told us also a story about how there's going to be technology at these Whole Food stores that will allow you to see exactly where your products are coming from.
Yes. So, it's at this point, the idea is to be, to connect the person to their food. That's what the local food movement was all about, or is all about. And I think local food will continue to be a strong movement. But, Whole Foods is one of the kind of the leaders, and there's several others out there, but Whole Foods is one of the leaders in trying to make sure consumers are educated about where their food comes from. And so there's a company out there who's working now to look at how they take technology and they can actually use that technology and show what's happening on the farm right in front of you as you're purchasing your food. And you can walk through the aisles and, see a real, actual picture on that farm of what's happening in terms of watering or harvesting or, whatever's going on at that day. This is where this piece of this tomato or whatever that you're about to eat, this is where it came from. This is what's happening there right now. So it just gives you that picture. It makes you feel that it's safe. It kind of gives you all those things in one. And so that type of technology is we're using just like any other thing, where video technology and all that has become really accessible as being applied in agriculture now.
That's promising, especially when we talk about an area like Alabama, where so much of the history is built upon agriculture and ag business. And like we were talking in the pregame, I'm kind of concerned, though, because what we see in a lot of these places, though, is that they're economically strapped. They're not having the income and the resources to basically maintain just basic levels of living. High percentages of people living below the poverty line and the kids growing up in poverty and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that will transcend into some of these places economically improving so that the people that live in those areas can live better. You see that type of development locally to where local governments are buying into being more, I guess, agriculturally savvy and understanding, those principles and incorporating them more into the lives of the public.
Yeah, I would say so. Alabama, is blessed with one thing that a lot of states don't have, and that's a lot of water resources. And because of that, I think that it is becoming more attractive for economic development around agriculture, and it's going to happen in a lot of these rural communities. The thing now is looking at it not just from the production ag side, but also the processing and manufacturing side, and looking at how, these companies, these counties can get into just that overall, processing food, which is where a lot of the dollars are in ag. And I think, they've worked on or been talking about in Selma having a food aggregation spot actually in the Selma area where farmers would bring, their products and aggregate them there, process them minimally, and then ship them back out, to larger companies. So things like that would create jobs and, open up opportunities for, that are not necessarily in the field. And I say that in agriculture has changed so much that a lot of what's produced now is produced in like greenhouses and things like that with hydroponics where, there's no soil, it's all in water. And that's provided new opportunities that kind of changes what you see as a farmer. The equipment necessary, you don't have to have a tractor to be a farmer and produce, and be able to live, produce a living wage on an operation that's strictly made of greenhouses. And, you can earn a living doing that. And so you see that happening now where you see people with greenhouse tomatoes and things like that are, finding their markets through restaurants and, higher end grocery stores and, being able to develop a market for products like that. And I think that some of just the education that some of our youth need to have is just being exposed to that. And there have been efforts for community gardens or school gardens to kind of expose them to just the general parts of it. But we need to take it a step further for them to understand the overall business side and how they actually can make a living off of that.
And that's what that's actually a good segue into my next question. What are the ways or what are the new means now to expose our youth to this industry?
I don't think enough. There's been some, and I think that every part of the country is looking at how do we kind of maintain youth in ag and from one end of ag to the other, because we see the average age of the farmer is increasing pretty fast. And right now, the average age of a farmer in the United States, and I think in Alabama also, is about 59 years old. So the average farmer, really, if you take that, is close to retirement. And so, we're looking at ways to make sure that, individuals stay there. USDA has developed programs for new and beginning farmers. And that gives them an opportunity to, kind of go through an educational process if they need to borrow money, where they go through a complete training program that is supposed to be designed to help them be successful as an agribusiness person. And so they have developed a program for new and beginning farmers. It has a section within that is strictly for socially disadvantaged farmers. So as from Hispanics to Latino farmers and African American farmers, those who are historically disadvantaged farmers, they have developed ways to kind of assist with getting a boost in terms of having a successful operation. And so there are some programs out there, but I think of the average kid, and we need to be reaching down really to elementary schools and junior high schools to kind of be more progressive at showing them what's out there and really being able to market our field.
In the DC area where I'm at, I have seen the school gardens and the neighborhood gardens, but is that popular in a state like Alabama or in the South?
Certain pockets.
Okay.
Certain pockets of Alabama, yes. And a lot of it is kind of community driven. I wouldn't say that the university's done some. There have been some grants to do community gardens, and a lot of it, our cooperative extension system will do a lot of things like that through what they have a master gardeners program and through 4-H, things like that. They'll try to sponsor community gardens and, educate youth about gardens and things like that, or just growing food and, knowing where your food comes from. That's a big deal where most people don't really think of the entire process of where their food actually comes from.
Yeah, be careful about the community garden. People be stealing from the community garden.
BG, how did y'all?
They don't contribute to the garden, but they'll sure come get them some greens or some stuff.
Hey, they know what greens are. Though. They know that they get greens and tomatoes and stuff out of your garden in a heartbeat. Huh?
Sure will.
How did y'all get started with y'all garden, BG? Him and his family they have a garden in their backyard, and I'm kind of curious to understand how how did that even go about getting started?
Well, that's my mom's garden. So my mom is actually in Selma. So she comes from the same kind of background though. Parents were sharecroppers and stuff like that. They tell stories about picking cotton and being out working the fields and stuff like that. So she comes from that background in Tallahassee, Alabama. So she's always been familiar with growing her own and all that. So as long as I can remember, she's had something, whether it be tomatoes, and now that she has more time, greens and broccoli. So it really just kind of comes from the way that she was raised and having that appreciation for the land and being able to provide for yourself because, stores and stuff wasn't readily available in the area that she grew up in. And her folks always emphasize the importance of maintaining land. If you got land in the family, hold on to that land because as long as you got some ground, as long as you got that, you'll be good.
That's right, because that's one thing that they can't make any more of, and it has to increase in value as the demand for it increases. So that's a big deal to keep that land ownership.
What are some of the things that that you all are doing at the university? Really wanted to use this time and give you some opportunity to really promote Arbor University, and even discuss, from what I was told, there's a partnership between Auburn and Alabama and them. So,
well, I will say that one of the things we're doing is we've changed the curriculum a lot. We've done a lot of things to make what we do a little bit more attractive to just a non-traditional student, I call them. And, the traditional student is one who grew up on the farm, knows all about ag, and they just come to get educated, get a degree in something they've really already been educated in. And so we're looking at how do we attract that student who really didn't know a whole lot about it or didn't understand the inner workings of it. How do we attract them and how do we get them prepared to go out and be confident and compete, as a person from my department, just an agribusiness person. But I think one of the neat things is really we are doing more multidisciplinary things where we're looking across, all majors and looking at how we combine the experience that our students get in order to, understand, exactly what they'll see when they get out. I've been chair for 3 years now, and our department has grown from about 140 students to right at 200 in that 3-year period, just in the undergraduate program. And we've started an undergraduate club, and right now we're planning a trip to go to Chicago to look at agriculture in Chicago. And I know people think Chicago, you think of big city, but a lot of these big food companies are based. A lot of those are based right there in Chicago. So we're going to visit some of the large agricultural companies and kind of look at that overall manufacturing and processing side that's happening there in Chicago. Stop along the way at Dow in Indianapolis, and just give them an exposure to the type of careers that are out there. There's a business that is just a food incubator or a business incubator that has a complete sector on agriculture that we're going to visit in Chicago. And their idea is looking at how do you grow a business from the ground floor up, an agricultural business. And a lot of that right now a lot of the growth is in food e-commerce. And so just looking at how you kind of have e-commerce related to food and dealing with other countries and things like that. But, for our students, we are working every day to increase the opportunities that they have in terms of internships, study abroad opportunities. We had a student do a semester abroad in France this year and go and learn something new. Every year we have, usually we have at least one student who is doing an internship in another country, from working with coffee plantations to working in Costa Rica, places like that, been in South in Africa, just, a lot of different places that our students are going to get a global education. And I think that, looking at that global picture is kind of what I can say we're doing in our college now to kind of broaden students' horizons. And with that, our cooperative extension system is merged between Alabama A&M and Auburn. So a lot of the programming that we do and our outreach efforts from, taking what we have at the university out to the counties is really a joint effort between Alabama A&M and Auburn University. So that's a legal merger where it's not an Auburn cooperative extension or Alabama A&M. It's an Alabama cooperative extension system. And we're one of the only states where that's actually happened, where the majority white and majority black institution are, one in terms of delivering those outreach efforts. So, that's a good thing to have that type of relationship where we are, kind of working together. And what we do, we don't try to compete with Alabama A&M in terms of, attracting students. If we can attract a student to ag and they go to either school, I think we've been successful. The idea is that, like I mentioned, we're 25,000 short in any given year. And I would say we even, as a percentage basis, we even shorter than that when it comes to minority students in ag. So, just tons of opportunity, and you look at, I can think of our students, they're coming out with very competitive jobs, right now, our undergraduate students are averaging about $47,000 per year, starting off. Some are a lot higher than that. You see some that are, if you're willing to leave the state, you can, there's a job waiting for you somewhere in ag. If you're willing to move outside of, really outside of your home area, which is what we try to encourage our students to do is be willing to move at least for a little while. And you have an opportunity. So, that's, in a nutshell, what I would say is keeps me going every day, just being able to interact with the students and help them develop a passion for it, help them, really look at what they can do and understand, how big this actual picture is, understand how big this industry is and what we contribute to just about every state.
We touched on it and really the misconception and the myth is that agriculture is just farming. And our hope is that if anything from this podcast, listeners can understand, especially our young listeners can at least understand that, agriculture is as Dr. Fields said, out of that dollar, only 15 cents goes to the actual farmer and everything in between is still agriculture, with processing kind of being that, from my understanding, processing being the bulk of where that money goes. So agriculture is more than just farming. And I think that alone should raise eyebrows to our listeners and to folks that just are not in the know in regards to what agriculture is.
And Doc, you talked about non-traditional. I got one even better than that. What about a non-traditional 34-year-old with a couple of degrees that's looking for a second career? Is it too late to get into agribusiness, or what steps could a person in that category follow to kind of get in line with this agricultural movement?
It's never too late. They come from all walks. And I was listening to the story about your mom. That generation is where a lot of our African American farmers are coming from now. They're retiring and going back into it and doing things that are just phenomenal. I met a lady in North Carolina. She has actually, they have on record, I think, the largest African American owned organic farm, Pine Knot Farms in North Carolina. And Ms. Linda came back and started later in life with kind of growing this organic agriculture. They have over 100 and some acres of organic production. So, and it's a way of life for her now. But, you have to think broad when you think of ag. So we have, folks who deals, pharmaceutical sales reps who are strictly related to ag. They're selling ag related pharmaceuticals. So you have to think broad when you think of what you can do in agriculture. So, you think of every animal has pharmaceuticals that they need also. So, they touch on them that way. And we have students who go out and that ends up being their career goal to be a pharmaceutical sales rep for ag related pharmaceuticals. So there's always a way. We see people coming from all walks and going from any end of it, cause if there's a business that fits your personality, there's an ag business that you can get involved in.
Have we gotten to the apps yet?
Auburn has what we call a Top Crops app that Auburn University produces. We're looking at now developing iBooks and doing iBooks for, being able to track your records and everything on an iBook, and, calculating things right in the field from apps that we have. We didn't talk a whole lot about the Farm Bill, but we work with Texas A&M University on an app to calculate, crop insurance, things like that. So you can look at strategies for selecting the right level of crop insurance strictly on your phone. That's the one thing. The phone is the one thing that across the entire world, the cell phone is that smartphone is pervasive. So I've done work in a lot in the Caribbean, and even a family that doesn't have a computer, they have that smartphone. And so we're looking at how we can address their needs, with apps and things like that, and be able to put information out through text messages and things that'll touch that cell phone more so than a computer, because they're on that smartphone much more than they are a computer.
It's a lot, BG.
It's amazing.
It is, and you can't forget farmersonly.com. That's another
another innovation in the agricultural world.
There's innovation everywhere. Doc, we know it's late. We know you gotta get your boys to bed, but and I really hate that we're cutting it shorter than what we really needed. But appreciate your time, Doc.
Hey, I enjoyed it, man. Y'all doing a great thing, and any way I can help, feel free to call.
Oh, definitely. We'd be interested in maybe even have some of your students or some of your grad students, maybe getting one of them on the show to talk about something that they're doing in particular. If they're interested and you got a grad student that wants to talk about some of the work that they're doing, we definitely will welcome on the show.
Certainly. We have a ton of success stories out there. So I could point you to a number of students that would be great examples, and we could pick from minority to otherwise and find some great success stories. So.
Oh, definitely. So did the student that created farmersonly.com attend Arbor University?
I don't think so. Now I can't take that credit.
If we have any listeners that was interested in contacting you, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you if they were interested in Arbor University, agriculture, or just contacting you about agriculture questions in general? Is there a means that they can reach you? Yeah,
my email address would be the best way, and my email address is FIELDDE@auburn.edu. And so that's something that's going to hit both the phones that I have, my computer, and, it'll hit me on my desk. So that's the best way to get in touch with me, and would love to share and try to attract more to the field. So
definitely. So listeners, if you have young people that are interested in agriculture, if you would like to learn more about agriculture, definitely hit up Dr. Fields. BG.
Yeah.
How can the people reach us, BG?
We are the Free Lunch Podcast, a member of the New South Movement Podcast Network. Check for us, www.freelunchpodcast.com. We're also on Instagram at Free Lunch Podcast, Twitter, Free Lunch Pod C, and we are on YouTube, Free Lunch TV, for video interviews and more content. We appreciate you, Dr. Fields, for joining us tonight, taking some time out of that busy schedule. I know the boys are looking for you.
Yeah, hey, that's right. And hey, when y'all come up here, I might treat y'all to a free lunch.
Oh, damn.
Exactly.
I'm gonna say exactly. It sounds good to me.
Just lock the guns up, though.
Lock the guns up and the dogs.
Oh man, y'all be good, man.
All right, I appreciate it, Doc, man. Talk
all
to
right.
you.